Welcome back, everybody, to That's DPI. I'm Zach, and that's Tyler over there. And I'm not even sure what episode it is, what number it is, but we have a lot of preseason storylines to discuss with you guys today. We're so happy to bring you guys another episode this week. Make sure that you're liking and subscribing on all of our videos. We wouldn't want you to miss the start of the NFL season. It's been building up to this. We haven't even made an episode while NFL teams are actively playing real meaningful football. So we wouldn't want you to miss the start of the season. But Tyler, we have some interesting news to discuss related to Rashee Rice. We've kind of been covering this story as it branched into the summer, but news related to Rashee Rice broke just yesterday. What is that news?
So, yeah, the Rashee Rice news is more of the fact that he won't be suspended at least the first 4 weeks because his disciplinary hearing with the NFL is set for September 30th, which is after week 4. So we know he will not be suspended for the first 4 games, and that's whatever. But Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, was sentenced on the exact same day as Rashee Rice, and he was instantly suspended for 3 games. And there is a lot of controversy about Rashee Rice because people are saying that the Chiefs have so many primetime games in the first 4 weeks that they want to wait for Rashee Rice to be suspended so that he can play in those primetime games. There's a lot of back and forth. Zach, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. The NFL has a history of getting what they want when it comes to disciplinary hearings. It's never really about disciplining the players for the crime. It's always been about getting what they want. That's why we see such disproportionate suspensions when it comes to gambling on college football, for example, when compared to getting into a six-car accident on a Texas highway while going over 100 miles an hour. So the NFL gets what they want. And the moral of the story is they're going to be able to do whatever they want. But I did want to make sure that I put it into proper context on why the Rashee Rice situation is a little bit different than the Jordan Addison situation. So, yes, they were sentenced on the same day, but Jordan Addison's case involves DUI. So, automatically, the NFL imposes a 3-game suspension. It's a different policy. And since it's a different policy, this policy has an automatic suspension. It's very similar to Jamison Williams last year getting suspended for a PES, performance enhancing substance. It's an automatic suspension. You can either choose to appeal it or just take the automatic suspension. And Jordan Addison's team has chosen to take the automatic suspension. That's why it was resolved so quickly. But the Rashee Rice situation is a different policy. It requires a specific agreement between um, certain parties involved on what the disciplinary action will be from the NFL. And therefore, since a lot of those parties disagree, a hearing will have to be held. A hearing was not necessary if Jordan Addison didn't want to appeal. So that's why it's different. However, the scheduling of the hearing, I still think, is the NFL's way of allowing Rashee Rice to play for the first 4 weeks of the season. Why schedule it all the way out in September 30th when we're in mid-August right now? That's really the question a lot of NFL fans have, and I don't blame them for asking that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to give the NFL as a Chiefs fan, I want to give the NFL, like some like must have been this, but man, it's not a good look. The only thing I will say though is if the NFL is doing this intentionally, it's not because of primetime games. During the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, the Chiefs have two primetime games. Fans are quick to point that out. There are two primetime games, the Brazil game against the Chargers, and then I believe the other one is Sunday Night Football against the
Giants.
Giants or Ravens. It is the Giants. Okay. The problem is, and I want to pull up my schedule as well just to confirm the exact same dates. But the problem is the second 4 games, meaning weeks 4 through 8 of the Chiefs season, 3 of them are primetime games, and 3 of them are also home games. And 3 of the 4 primetime games between weeks 4 and 8 show that it's not a primetime game. My issue, however, is if the NFL did this intentionally, the matchups are different. During weeks 1 through 4, The Chiefs will play the Chargers, the Giants, the Ravens, and the Eagles. That's not in order, but those are the 4 matchups. So we've got a primetime game in Brazil, a Super Bowl rematch, and then a AFC Championship game rematch from 2 years ago. That's a gauntlet. Meanwhile, the second 4 games, while there are 3 primetime games, it's against the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Lions, and the Commanders. Still playoff teams, good teams, but there's a difference between that four,
Yeah.
between weeks 4 through 8 and weeks 1 through 4. And so if I'm not a Chiefs fan, oh man, I'm looking like this is big. This is the biggest piece of evidence of they're just giving it the Chiefs. Cancel the season now. Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl and they're going to make sure it happens. And I kind of get it.
Yeah.
It's
I
not a
mean,
good look.
the NFL should be doing everything they can to avoid the rigged controversies that have been going on over the last 3 years. Been a lot of discussions about it. And this just feels like throwing a T-bone steak to a pack of hungry dogs. As far as I'm concerned, the
Mm-hmm.
NFL is already itching for a reason to pin the NFL on rigging it or giving the Chiefs a competitive advantage. And this doesn't help their case. No matter how you swing it, even if this was the way they normally did it, it would be a bad look. But it's not. This is a deviant from the way the NFL normally handles these disciplinary situations. They typically resolve them as soon as they can following the conclusion of the legal process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in the Deshaun Watson case, which I want you to say your piece that you told me the other day about that. Even in the Deshaun Watson piece, they resolved it as soon as the legal process was over, because that's generally how the NFL operates. But like I said earlier, the NFL always gets what they want when it comes to these disciplinary hearings. Explain to our viewers why that was the case in the Watson scenario as well.
Yeah. So Deshaun Watson, and you're correct. Deshaun Watson was suspended very quickly after the legal process. After he settled his cases of sexual assault, the suspension came very quickly. He was suspended for 11 games, which is a weird thing. Like outside of Jordan Addison getting the automatic 3, he just got the automatic what it was. You don't see a lot of odd number games. Maybe it's like 5 or something, but like 11's a weird number. And fans immediately pointed out that the Cleveland Browns' 12th game of the season was against the Houston Texans, his former team. And NFL fans ever said there is no way that they randomly decided on 11 instead of 12. They decided on 11 so that he could play against his former team. And I think that's the case here with Rashee Rice. They want Rashee Rice in the game against in Brazil against the Chargers, in the Super Bowl rematch, in the AFC Championship rematch from 2 years ago. Ironically, two rematches that Rashee Rice was not part of.
Right?
But it is interesting though that it's not a good look. This is the biggest piece of evidence that fans have given me that the NFL is favoring the Chiefs, because every time we break down NFL official calls, there's nothing there to say it. There's so little evidence when you actually get detailed, precise, and informed about it. This one, however, looks really bad.
Yeah, and there's one more thing, and this is the last thing we'll say on this. We'll move on to some fantasy football previews and some injury updates. But I think that you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said it's about the matchups. The NFL drew a lot of criticism for the quality of the product that they were putting on the screen every Sunday. We were getting a lot of bad football early on in the season, and people were complaining, people were talking. And I think the last thing the NFL wants to do is have the Chiefs go out there and trot out another really questionable product on offense, because you and I both watched them every game last year. It took a long time for them to gel. And I don't think they ever fully really
Mm-hmm.
did gel. And it was the subject of a lot of ire from NFL fans talking about how the Chiefs just didn't have it on offense anymore like they used to. And so I think the NFL really wants to avoid those narratives happening again to begin the season. And they want those matchups to be more competitive and more entertaining at the end of the day. That's the NFL's job, is to keep it entertaining. And I have no doubt that this decision has something to do with keeping an entertaining product on the field. The Chiefs are going to draw ratings whenever they play, but do you want your Super Bowl rematch to be boring or another blowout? No, you don't. And the NFL is taking that into account.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I want to give the NFL the benefit of the doubt, but the Chiefs haters have the biggest piece of ammo that they've ever actually had
Agreed, for
in this
sure.
one.
Speaking of the Chiefs, we want to discuss some major high profile injuries, one of which did happen to Kansas City. But we wanted to discuss it in an overarching theme of NFL teams' approach to the preseason, and is it contributing to more injuries? And is there a kind of a new wave of how you approach the preseason to avoid injuries? So I'll let you start that segment off. What was that injury that Kansas City suffered in their first preseason game?
So it was safety Dion Bush that tore his Achilles in week one of the preseason game. Now, Dion Bush is not someone that was going to be a starter. In fact, you and I have talked off air about him being on the bubble. So, him playing in the preseason game, whether you rest starters or not, he would have played either way. But it does lead to the question of there were a lot of not just injuries this first preseason game, but there was a lot of scary injuries. We had for the second time in my lifetime memory an NFL game being suspended because of an injury. Does this change the way? And Andy Reid is notorious for playing his starters and suiting them up the whole game, at least. Should Andy Reid and the Chiefs change up their narrative? And my hot take is that he shouldn't. Andy Reid has won 3 Super Bowls with the way that he has, and I know he doesn't win Super Bowls because of the way he manages preseason games. But Andy Reid is big on getting those guys a couple game reps, so that when we go into the first part of the season, which we've already discussed as a gauntlet, they've got some live reps already. I don't think Andy Reid needs to change up that. If Patrick Mahomes gets 5 plays at most and 1 throw in the preseason game, so I don't think that the injuries this week should really scare Andy Reid from changing up what he does. Let Andy Reid cook. Let him keep doing what he's doing. Play the starters.
Sure. But is there a potential argument with some of these major injuries? I know that Dion Bush may not be a player that everyone in the NFL knows, but I know that Rashawn Slater of the Chargers, Landon Dickerson of the Eagles are going down. Preserving your team for the regular season is a massive part of staying competitive. I mean, the Lions' entire season was derailed by injuries last year, some of which happened in the regular season, but some of which happened in the preseason too. And so keeping your players healthy while also getting them the reps is a huge balance that teams are facing. Andy Reid tends to play his starters in the preseason, whereas Dan Campbell refuses, flat out, does not play any of the starters. However, he opts to do a joint practice compromise where he really just gets those starters joint practice reps against other teams that he plays. So I'm curious to your thoughts on which of these strategies you'd prefer your team to take, because the obvious advantages of a joint practice is you get to control the situation, the tempo, the scenario. If you want to work on
Mhm.
red zone, you can put out your ones and 11 on 11. You can get an agreement with the coach and you can go do a red zone. That's something you may not be able to get. If Patrick Mahomes and the offense stall out on their first 2 drives, you won't get a single red zone rep and you won't get prepared live for those situations. So you could enter the season rusty on that prep, but for joint practices, you can really hit all the boxes that you want before the NFL season starts with a little bit more control.
Is there an argument to be made that you should rest the starters? Absolutely. I'm not going to walk into Dan Campbell's office and be like, "How dare you rest Jared Goff, you idiot?" No, I'm not going to be doing that. I get it. I get it. But Andy Reid's thing is we're going to play him. And Zach, I mean, you and I have both played high school football. We know there is a big difference between team sessions in practice and the game. So even though a preseason game doesn't matter, there's a big difference between that. I would argue that a joint practice, you're not going to get 1,000% like you are even in a preseason game. So I don't think, and I also think you can control it still to a degree. If you want to see red zone scenario, you can still be like, hey, it's 2nd and 2. we're going to treat this like a red zone scenario a little bit if you really want to, because preseason the score is not what's being measured. I understand what you're saying, but I would still prefer the starters to get played for one series, not a whole quarter, but just a series or two. I have no problem with that.
Okay, interesting. And another thing on the injuries before we get to fantasy football, do you think that there has been a disproportionate amount of injuries this season, or is it just kind of overblown because of the severity of the Maurice Norris situation with the Lions in Atlanta, which was obviously very scary, and some of the other major injuries like Rashawn Slater going down and maybe Matthew Stafford's epidural, or is it just
I
normal
feel like it's
proportions?
I feel like it's normal proportions because I feel that every year we have this discussion. I feel like every year there's like, wow, there's so many injuries. This is why we need to get rid of preseason games and so on and so forth. So it feels like we have a lot, but I think logically it's probably the same number. If you really dive into statistics, I think it's the same number.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I just think this is a really tough part of the season. I mean, you're doing more padded practices during training camp than you do any time during the season. I mean, 8
Mm-hmm.
padded practices in 10 days in some cases for teams. That's a lot. I mean, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of teams barely get one padded practice in per week. And training camp is just so much more intense. And so, of course, we expect there to be a couple more injuries, but I think it's fairly normal. But we're going to move on to our last segment of the day, and that is a fantasy football segment. You guys are starting your drafts up. We want to make sure you're prepared when you watch our podcast. And so we have a little segment for you called Overrated or Underrated. We've got some players that we want to highlight as potentially overrated and discuss them each individually, come to a consensus, and maybe some underrated players that we want to discuss. Are they truly underrated or not? And Tyler, I want you to start with your first guy in the overrated category.
My first guy in the overrated category. And Zach, if you see me look down, I do get the ESPN Fantasy Football Magazine every single year. This is not a sponsorship. I wish it was, but this is not a sponsorship. So if you see me looking down, this is what I'm looking at. My first overrated guy is Puka Nakua. Puka Nakua is currently rated fourth on the wide receiver category. And I think that with his injury prone history over the season, I really struggle to put Puka Nakua at the fourth ranked wide receiver.
Interesting. This is something that we actually disagree on. I think that Puka Nakua has the volume to and the statistics. Like there's kind of a graph where it's like separation per routes run and like number of targets, and it kind of helps you understand which receivers are getting open a ton and getting thrown to a ton. Because if you're Jerry Judy and you get open a bunch, but Joe Flacco isn't, or whoever's quarterback in the Browns offense isn't getting you the ball, you're not very valuable. And Puka Nakua is kind of like in the Patrick Mahomes segment of that graph where he's like in the top left. You know, you've seen the graphs on Twitter where it's like
Mhm.
comparing some quarterback metric. Yeah, that's where Puka Nakua sits. And so the only concern about him is injury. It's not talent, it's not getting open, and it's certainly not targets. Matthew Stafford slings it all the time. So I'm
But
actually
that's
really
where my
high.
concern is, though. When Puka Nakua is on the field, absolutely, he's great. He's like Christian McCaffrey. When he's on the field and healthy, one of the best there is in the NFL. But man, how many times have I been burned by him getting hurt, or someone else on the Rams getting hurt, and then they double team Puka because that's all they have left, and then his production goes down.
I mean, you certainly do have a point. The injuries are scary. Um, and it's always something to consider when you draft a guy that high. You don't want him to get hurt. It's why Christian McCaffrey slid out of the first round. There's no doubt that he has RB1 potential. But that's if he stays healthy. And when's the last time that's truly happened?
I will not be drafting Christian McCaffrey personally.
Me neither. All right. I like that
Who's your
one.
overrated? Short and
Yeah,
sweet for Puka. I wouldn't draft him at number four. If there's only three wide receivers off the board, I would go with somebody else over Puka.
gotcha. You gave us a wide receiver. I'm going to give us a running back. I'm going to give us Brees Hall from the Jets. I think that Brees Hall is very talented. I think that he has obviously demonstrated that he can handle a lot of work and be productive in an offense like that. The problem is not Brees, it's his new offensive scheme. Um, and that's Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn comes from Detroit. They have a young, talented running back in Braylon Allen sitting behind Brees Hall, and they have a running quarterback in Justin Fields. I just think it's going to take some time for this offense to mesh. And I think that Braylon Allen is going to dip significantly into Brees Hall's carries and prevent him from being a high volume guy. And without volume, I think Brees Hall is closer to the middle of the pack rather than the top where he's going currently. I would wait on Brees Hall, and I would not draft him in the first 3-ish rounds.
I actually agree with you. I think Brees Hall's vibes are way higher than his actual statistics. I think the vibe is him being a top 5 running back, and he's just not. Uh, Actually, ESPN's currently ranking him at running back number 16, which I stand by. And I think putting him out at RB 16 goes along with what you just said about him. Brees Hall's never been a guy that actually shows up in the numbers game, despite kind of what his week to week projections are. I think he always underperforms. So I agree with you that Brees Hall is another overrated guy.
Right. And he's never had a 1,000-yard season. His yards per carry has only gone down since his rookie year from 5.8 to 4.5 to now 4.2 this past season. I think he's a prime candidate to get his reps stolen by a younger, more talented back, especially with a Detroit Dan Campbell disciple at the helm in New York. But moving on to your next overrated guy, who do you got up for us this time?
So I got to preface this with my over or underrated statements come from where they are ranked position wise.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily whether I think they're going to be good or bad, but where they're ranked. So I'm going to stick with running back, and I'm going to go with a rookie running back out of Boise State. I'm going to go with Ashton Genty. Currently, ESPN ranks him at number 5 in running backs, and I think that's so high. I think it's way too early to put him there. I do think Ashton Genty is going to be good. I think the negative comments about him having one bad preseason game is an overreaction, but I cannot put a rookie running back at number 5 on my ranking. Right behind, um, he's right behind Christian McCaffrey. Putting Ashton Genty in the same ranking territory as Christian McCaffrey would be nuts.
Yeah, especially when he doesn't. I don't know if he has the receiving upside as a rookie yet. I have no doubt that he could
Mm-hmm.
develop it, but I agree with you. I think Genty is a little bit overrated. At RB5, he tends to go in the first round. I've seen him go in the top 10.
The
I would
first?
say I've seen multiple leagues where he goes in the first round in a
Oh,
leagues where,
wow.
and so I think that is a severe overdraft. Genty will be good, but is he worth a top 10 pick? I just don't think you can take the risk quite yet. Leave him for the second and third round. Honestly, you should be drafting Brees Hall and Ashton Genty kind of in the same area of the draft, in my opinion, just until
The
we know
only
what
way
he's got.
I can get behind, I agree. The only way I can get behind drafting Ashton Genty early on is if you're in a dynasty league
Hmm.
where you get to keep your players. A little bit of a risk drafting him early, but you get to keep him, you lock him in because I do think he's going to be a special talent.
Yeah, that's a
But if
good
not
point.
in a dynasty league, I cannot
Yeah.
justify anyone drafting him within the first 2 rounds, I think.
I think late in the second round's a good spot for him, but I agree with you. First round, off limits.
Hmm.
But I'll stick with the Raiders for my next pick. It's Brock Bowers.
Oh,
I really
okay.
like Brock Bowers. I think he's extremely talented. But here's my thing with Brock Bowers. We had a very similar situation with Sam Laporta. He broke rookie tight end records. He was phenomenal in his first year with Detroit, and he kind of took a step back. But Sam Laporta's ADP went like this when you know he skyrocketed into the point where he was being drafted in the second round of some drafts last season, and I think that's way too high. Brock Bowers is currently going in that same range, and I think that people are going to get burned. New head coach in Pete Carroll, new quarterback, changes on across the entire offensive line, probably leading to a more run-heavy attack that could allow the Raiders to pass less. And I just think that Brock Bowers is going to be the casualty in that. Not that he's not going to be productive, not that he's not a super talented player. I just don't think that second round ADP is right for a tight end going into his sophomore season when we have seen tight ends go into their sophomore season and perform not as good as expected.
When you said Brock Bowers, I was like, oh, I'm gonna disagree with you hard on this one. You actually convinced me because I agree. I wouldn't draft tight end in the second round either. I don't draft tight ends in the second round ever, personally, no matter who they are. But I will say I do think Brock Bowers is one of those tight ends that you gotta have. I think there's only about 5 tight ends in the NFL that are really going to be game changers, and I do think Brock Bowers is one of them. So I wouldn't draft him at second round. I wouldn't put him at number 1 where ESPN has him, but I do think he's one of those guys that's gonna go win. That's gonna win your fantasy league if you draft him at the right time. If he falls to the 4th round and he is the number 1 tight end off the board, I'm okay with that. Wouldn't go draft him at 2. But I am okay with a 4th round first tight end off the board situation if you guys find yourself in that situation.
It's more of a value thing for me. He's the consensus number 1 tight end across the board, and every single fantasy website except for CBS has him in the top 24, meaning the first 2 rounds. CBS has him at 25th for context, so top of the 3rd. I think that it's a value thing. You can get so much more value out of a second running back or a second wide receiver in the 3rd round than you can a tight end that you don't know is going to be tight end 1. Like if it's clear cut, if it was Travis Kelce in 2019, maybe you can make the argument, but we just don't know yet if Brock Bowers is going to be that guy. It's too risky to draft him that highly. But like you said, 3rd to 4th round, that's a sweet spot that I think you could consider taking someone like Bowers. But moving on, no more Raiders. Let's talk about another team. Who do you got next?
For overrated, I hate that I have to say this, but I gotta go Pat Mahomes. I think Patrick
Wow.
Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes doesn't put up fancy numbers. Patrick Mahomes can win games, he can extend plays, but he doesn't put up a lot of fancy numbers for what people think he is based on. It's kind of like what I said with who was the guy that I said was about vibes that you just talked about?
Brees Hall.
I'm blanking. Brees Hall, yeah. I think it's a Brees Hall situation to where Patrick Mahomes' vibes is so good because he is so good. But number wise and statistic wise, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been on it for a couple years, and I think offensive coordinator Matt Nagy is to blame. But nonetheless, I would not draft Patrick Mahomes unless he falls to like the 5th round, and he's
Yeah,
just not going to fall to the 5th round.
I agree with you on this one, and I'm going to try to avoid being a homer here. But Patrick Mahomes' sleeper ranking, and I use sleeper, I know you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Mahomes' sleeper ranking is 53rd. ESPN and CBS have him around 47 in PPR leagues. Okay, Jared Goff is at 120 in ESPN and 89 in sleeper. I feel like you get the same fantasy production out of both quarterbacks points wise, and you can get
Mm-hmm.
Jared Goff 40 picks later, sometimes even more than that. And so I think it's a definite reach to take Patrick Mahomes as either the 5th or 6th best quarterback in fantasy when he just hasn't shown that he can give that production over the last 2 seasons under Matt Nagy. I agree with you. This says nothing about Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback or as a leader, as
Mm-hmm.
an accomplishments thing. It is purely fantasy perspective. Patrick Mahomes right now is overrated purely because of his accolades, not because of his statistics and points.
And the one last thing I want to add on to that too is what makes Patrick Mahomes so great is that he can extend a play. Okay, he might be about to get sacked. He runs 20 yards in the backfield and then dumps it off for a 5-yard first down. ESPN fantasy, when in every fantasy, is going to throw that for a 5-yard first down. You don't get any points for extending the play. That's what makes him so great is being able to do that. But you don't get extra points for doing that.
Sure. And the Chiefs only averaged 22 points per game offensively last year. I'm going to need to see that improve before I spend a top 50 pick, top 60 pick on Patrick Mahomes. But I agree. Moving on, I've got one more overrated player. I don't know how many you've got, but my last overrated player is Devon Achane of Miami. And this is due to the fact that it actually has nothing to do with Achane. I think Achane in a perfect world, is ranked correctly. The problem is not him. It is his offense and his quarterback. You look at Devon Achane's numbers when Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, he's a great player. You look at Devon Achane's numbers when Tua Tagovailoa is not healthy, it's a completely different story. And this is why trust in Tua staying healthy, not very high. And I think a lot of NFL fans are with me. But Devon Achane needs the receiving production to justify that high ADP. Without the receiving production, without the cheat motions and the complicated offense that Tua and McDaniels run down there, he's not as valuable. And so I think that's a huge, huge risk. Basically, you're betting on Tua staying healthy the entire season to make Achane that valuable. To go in the second round, early in the second round at that.
I have no argument against that. I agree with everything you've said. As someone who has been burned by Achan expecting to do well and then him doing not well at all, I agree. ESPN ranks him at the sixth best running back. Here are running backs below Devon Achan that I think will be better. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, James Cook. All of those are running backs that are ranked lower than Devon Achan that I think will be better. You can argue Jonathan Taylor as well in that mix, who's ranked lower than Achan that I think will be better. So yeah, if you're in the early second round, I agree. There's so much better options at running back alone than Devon.
Yeah, I mean, he was phenomenal as a receiver last year. I don't see that going anywhere, but that receiving production is dependent on the scheme and the quarterback. So I agree with you. The running backs you listed, I like them better than HN. I do think he has a high ceiling, but once again, that ceiling is not dependent on him. It's dependent on external factors, and it makes it really tough for me to draft him. As the ADP on Sleeper for a PPR has him at 15. That's top of the second round in a 12-man league. ESPN has him at 12. That's too rich for me.
I agree with that. And I'm out of overrated players. I want to switch to underrated players now. My number one underrated player is Jalen Hurts. I
Okay.
think Hurts is the opposite of Mahomes. I think Mahomes is way better of a quarterback than he's actually going to get in fantasy. I think Hurts is the opposite. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I think he's a good game manager, but he is a statistical dreamland because of the tush push. His stats are inflated because of the tush push. That's kind of one of the arguments as to why people say Jalen Hurts is overrated as a quarterback. But that doesn't matter. The tush push is 6.1 points because it is a 1 yard rush and a touchdown. And every single time a tush push occurs, you will be gaining 6.1 points out of Jalen Hurts. And he's my number one quarterback in fantasy football personally.
In terms of value, then you're saying?
Just in general. I in terms of fantasy production, I expect Jalen Hurts to be the number one quarterback in the NFL in terms of fantasy football numbers.
Fascinating. So you expect that Eagles offense to really lean on the short yardage game with Hurts. I tend to
I
agree.
think the Eagles are going to be petty this year about the tush push almost getting banned. So I think they are going to kick the tush push up a notch, personally.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly based on Nick Sirianni's coaching style. I don't disagree with you at
Right?
all. And look, his rushing stats have only gotten more beneficial for fantasy football players as he's gotten further in the scheme, right? He has double digit rushing touchdowns in each of the last 4 seasons. Okay? And that's not going anywhere. He's uniquely capable of shoving his center into the end zone and scoring double digit rushing touchdowns. He's also very accurate. He doesn't turn the football over. So as a passer, he provides value there too. It's not just tush push. I think that his ADP is way lower than where he should be, and you can get some serious value by selecting him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe over some guys like Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels who go a lot higher, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I tend to agree. My first underrated player is Calvin Ridley of the Titans. Calvin Ridley is currently going in like the 6th or 7th round. He's the number 1 receiver in an offense who just added a gunslinger quarterback in Cam Ward. Nobody's talking about Cam Ward. I'm seeing no buzz about him. More people are talking about Caleb Williams throwing a fit at a netting drill in training camp than talking about the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. Calvin Ridley is the undisputed wide receiver 1 in that offense. They added no competition whatsoever. I don't count Tyler Lockett as competition, okay? I don't. Calvin Ridley had 1,000 yards last year. He was uber productive on an offense that was arguably much worse than they are now. I think that he's a steal where he's going.
I agree with everything you said except for Tyler Lockett comment. I do think that Tyler Lockett is going to be good in Tennessee. I think he's been good in Seattle, and I think he's another sleeper pick as well. So we're going to sneak Tyler Lockett into that underrated stuff. But no, I agree that Calvin, if you can get 1,000 yards out of Calvin Ridley, I mean Mike Evans, one of the best tight end, one of the best wide
He's built like a
receivers
tight end.
in fantasy football. He's gotten that by just having 1,000 yards every year. 1,000 yards is a great season. If you can get 1,000 yard season out of a 6th or 7th round fantasy football pick, that's a steal.
Yeah, I mean, and in an offense led by Will Levis, he had 120 targets. I don't see Tyler
That's even
Lockett.
more impressive.
Yeah, I don't see Tyler Lockett cutting into that very much, solely because they also lost Nick Westbrook-Akine. I don't see. I see that kind of being a 1-to-1 replacement. Westbrook-Akine had like 9 touchdowns last year. I think that Ridley is going to score more than 4 touchdowns this season and still get that same volume with Cam Ward in the offense. So I tend to agree with what you said as well. But he is underrated. We'll go to your next player. Who do you got?
My next player, and this is again where I have to preface it by saying where ESPN ranks them position wise. And my next underrated player, you'll like this one, Zach. It's Sam Laporta. Sam
Wow.
Laporta is ranked as number 4 on the tight ends. Sam Laporta is, I mean, I did say Brock Bowers is number 1. I'm okay if you take Brock Bowers as the number 1 tight end off the board. But if it's not Brock Bowers, I think it needs to be Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta being ranked below a guy like George Kittle and Trey McBride is criminal. Sam Laporta is one of the best tight ends of the last 2 years. He's a phenomenal young guy. Jared Goff loves throwing that mid-depth ball, and Sam Laporta is usually the guy to get that if it's not Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Sam Laporta, I think, is going to get a lot of touchdowns this year as well. I don't know how you rank Sam Laporta as the 4th best tight end. To me, he's arguably number 1. I think he's going to get a lot of production. He's certainly going to be a tight end that wins your fantasy football league and is going to put you over the edge against a team that has a mid-tier tight end.
Yeah, he's certainly going pretty high. So how can someone going so high be underrated? It's because he has tight end 1 potential, and he could be very easily better than Kittle and Bowers without question. He was dealing with a hamstring injury for the first 6 weeks of the season last year, hampered his production. Look at his numbers when he was healthy. He returned to form. He caught touchdown after touchdown, and he still maintained a level of consistency that should make him a must draft if you see him available after the middle of the 4th round, in my opinion. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And the other thing too as well is yes, he is going high, but I think, and it's saying something for me to say draft a tight end before round 3. I that's just kind of a no-go for me in strategy wise. I'm okay if you draft Sam Laporta in the late 1st round or sometime in the 2nd round. I'm okay. I think he's very equivalent to a top 15 pick. Because
Wow.
especially with how rare a good tight end is in the NFL, good in terms of fantasy winning production, go get Laporta. And if you get him, you're setting your fantasy team up for a lot of success.
I agree. Good value, him at the 4th tight end going off the board when he very easily could finish as the number 1. We're not going to stop talking about the Lions yet. We're going to talk about my next underrated player, Jameson Williams. And to me, this one, he's criminally underrated. Okay. And here's why. Tyler can attest that you would be hard pressed to find someone who has engaged with and watched more Lions content this offseason than me, especially with recent circumstances. I have had so much time to delve into everything that I want to do related to the Lions, and every single metric that I've ever seen points to Jameson Williams eclipsing every single statistical category that he achieved last year. And for context, that was 58 catches for 1,001 yards and 8 total touchdowns. He had a 7 receiving and 1 rushing. He is currently outside of the top 60 in sleeper for PPR. ESPN has him at 67. CBS has him at 68. This is criminal. Jameson Williams is dominating in joint practices, the fastest receiver in the NFC, is in a highly productive offense where the new offensive coordinator said he and Jahmyr Gibbs are going to be the priority. And his chemistry and route running have only gotten better with Jared Goff. Every single coach and analyst has said so. And if you look at the tape during practice and joint practices, you can see it with your own eyes. And I have. Trust me. Jameson Williams should not be going where he's going. Snag him in the 4th round and win your leagues, please.
I'm gonna play good cop, bad cop here a little bit. The good cop is I very much agree. ESPN ranks him as the 31st best wide receiver, not even top 25. And I do think that is very underrated. Now for the bad cop. My concern is that with 2 good running backs in Detroit, one of the best tight ends in the NFL right now, and the 5th best wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, are all of those other factors going to lower Jameson Williams' production?
No, because it's the exact same as last year, and he's only gotten better. Every single mouth to feed in that offense was there last year. Nothing's changed. Jameson Williams was a 1,000-yard receiver with 8 touchdowns last year and was a focal point of the offense. And then they decided to do the exact same thing with a new offensive coordinator who said the 2 players he's going to prioritize are JMO and Gibbs. If anything, that's a good sign that everything stayed the same. He was productive before. There's no reason to suggest he won't be productive now. By the way, he was out for 2 games with a suspension that season that he got the 1,000 yards. So he has 2 games to build off of that campaign if fully healthy. I just don't think that there's any reason to suggest a regression for him. Everything points to him just outperforming his last season, maybe even by a significant margin.
My last question there then is, I guess is a little bit of a bonus content, is based on that comment by y'all's new offensive coordinator, does that mean that Amon-Ra St. Brown might be a little overrated?
I struggle to say because a lot of the times I see him go top 7, top 6, right? And my answer is no, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is ruthlessly consistent and he has insane chemistry with Jared Goff. They are literally like doing handoffs on 20-yard passes down the field. He has the talent, the chemistry, the work ethic, the route running, the toughness to be the most consistent player. So for the same reason we said don't draft Achane, McCaffrey, Puka, do draft St. Brown because he is the same player week in and week out, and he will not disappoint you ever.
Okay. Okay, I respect that.
There's
I like
value in
that analysis.
consistency. Yeah.
I like that. For my last, and this is where we'll end today's episode. For my last underrated player, I'm gonna stay in the wide receiver room, but I'm gonna leave Detroit and I'm gonna go to the sunny beaches of Miami. I think Tyreek Hill being ranked at number 13 on wide receivers is interesting, to say the least. I think his production numbers can be lower when Tua's injured, and I think that's why he's ranked so low. But I think Tyreek Hill's a guy that you can take that risk on a lot earlier than the 13th wide receiver off the board. I think he is one of the best players, one of the best wide receivers that I've seen in my lifetime, and probably number 1 player, probably top 5 player of all time in terms of ball tracking ability. If
Yep.
Tua or his back can just throw it up anywhere, Tyreek Hill will land where that ball is perfectly. And he's so fast to be able to get that ball. He also does a lot of jet sweep tosses in that offense as well. And I think he is going to end up being a top 5 to top 7 wide receiver. I think 13 is an absolute steal for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, no disagreements for me. I do think this is the last year of the Tyreek Hill has a nuclear ceiling because of age and regression, but there's no reason to suggest Tyreek Hill's going anywhere because of exactly what you said. You've brought up the 2 points that I would have. Touch passes that give you PPR points and ball tracking. That's it. That's all you need. He's a great deep threat, the best speed threat in the NFL currently, and nobody's doing anything to usurp him just yet.
And this is also a guy that was on pace to get 2,000 yards at one point before he got hurt.
Yeah. Injuries with the Miami Dolphins obviously a concern, but Tyreek Hill's gonna Tyreek Hill, I think.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I'll round us out. I have one final player for you guys. It's not a Lion, I promise. It's a former Lion. It is TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson is currently slated at sleeper as the 58th player in the draft and the 5th tight end. CBS has him as the 7th tight end, but consensus is around the 5th. So right after Sam Laporta, right? TJ Hawkinson is in a unique situation where he has a JJ McCarthy throwing him the football. No Jordan Addison for the first 3 weeks. So he's instantly the second target in the offense. Those 3 weeks are super important for a young quarterback's development. So if JJ McCarthy gains chemistry with Hawkinson early, I don't see it going anywhere. I see Hawkinson being a safety blanket, an early chemistry building player in that offense. Of course, he's going to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson. But when Justin Jefferson is triple teamed, who do you think he's going to? Hawkinson is going to have 100 catches this year if the Vikings throw the ball at the rate that they did with Sam Darnold, just because you have to account for Justin Jefferson. And the rookie quarterback who has a lot of experience at Michigan, I think is going to lean on his tight ends. And for context, Sam Laporta is at 48 on the big board, number 48 player. Hawkinson's at 58. So that's almost a full round later that you can snag Hawkinson, a player that I think has serious upside with a new quarterback and being the safety blanket in that offense.
I see where you're at. I don't love Hawkinson. He's someone that I would go get because I waited too long to draft a tight end. And so I mean, I think there's a lot of guys that are better than him. I think he might prevent you from losing football games, but I don't think he's going to make you win football games, if that makes sense at all. He's not my favorite tight end on the board. But yes, there are. I think the good thing about TJ Hawkins is he's not going to get 15 points a game, but he is going to get the same number of points per game rather than getting 21 week and 2 the next week. And so I think he's consistent. So I think he's a safe pick.
So here's my counter to that. Just 2023. So this was 2 seasons ago, right? TJ Hawkinson played in 15 games, missed 2 games that year, started in 11, was targeted 127 times for 95 catches, nearly 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He was a league winner that season. That's a league-winning tight end stat line. 95 catches is absurd. He was obviously not healthy in 2024, coming off a serious injury, ramping up, and obviously did not provide the same value. A fully healthy offseason should allow him to return to those 2023 levels just 2 years ago. And I think that he's going to be on par with a guy like George Kittle or Sam Laporta, and he's going much later than those guys.
I agree that he's going to be on par with George Kittle, but I also say that as someone who runs from George Kittle like you think flag. I just don't like George Kittle. I think he's another guy that's very inconsistent. When you draft him, you don't know if you're going to get 20 points per game or 2 points per game. George Kittle's just very inconsistent throughout his career. You just don't know what you're going to get when you draft him. That's why I say he's not my favorite tight end. I think his injury plus the rookie quarterbackness makes him just a little bit more of a question mark. And I don't know. I do think Kittle will be a little bit better than him this year, though, but not my favorite guy. That's kind of how I'll see. He's not my favorite guy by any means.
Yeah, I think that your argument held a lot of water from 2020 to 2022, where he had some inconsistent play, some injuries he dealt with. But man, Kittle, and you know my thoughts on Kittle. He's aged like fine wine. He's played in every game this past season and back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. It's really tough. And back-to-back 90-plus target seasons. It's really tough to get a guy like Kittle at his age. I do think that he's open for regression entering his age 30, 31 season.
Something
I
like
think it's
that.
actually he's going to be
Something like
30,
that.
32 on NFL kickoff. So
Okay.
how long can he
And like I
can he
said,
do
it's
it?
just I think once you're a couple weeks into the season, you're gonna know which tight end you're gonna be getting. I just think that at any point in time, either of those guys could pop off and have a great another 1,000 yard season like Kittle's had the last 2 years. But at any time, he could also realize, oh, I screwed up.
Right.
So I worry about those two tight ends.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's all we've got for you guys. Make sure you tune in next week for our full 53-man roster projections for the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to break down every position group. It's going to be a longer episode, but we're really happy to bring it to you. Chiefs fans will certainly dig it. And we're also going to cover a little bit of fantasy football if there's time. But make sure you like the video and tune in next week.
Appreciate you guys.